drinking beer with. Rule number one at Lagunitas is don't be a dick. So, yeah, no matter what we're doing when we're out there, I think we're trying to enjoy ourselves. And you know, you don't always want to be out at the bars till 2 a.m., but when you are, just make sure you're representing yourself in a way that's genuine. For us, if you ever get to meet a Lagunitas person and you know that they're your Lagunitas contact, you know, we're going to get back to your calls. We're going to respond to your emails. I think that's just really important in terms of, again, building this tribe and having people trust you and rely on you as a partner, you know, a beer partner. That's me in a banana suit eating a banana split, by the way. It's, what is that, cannibalism, I think? It's cannibalism it's called, maybe? And our people need to have passion, not only for beer, you know, the most importantly, Tony said it earlier, 4 fucking ingredients. And after all these years, we're still making flavors that nobody on earth has tested. You know, I'm sure you've had a beer out there that kind of made your mouth go, wow. You know, and I think that's something that all brewers are passionate about. You know, Tony McGee, our founder, went from doing something that he didn't necessarily enjoy. He worked in advertising and print, to doing something he loved, making beer. And I hope that through beer, we can help fuel other people's passions in the communities that we're selling beer. So, you know, finding ways to really take the beer and help fuel things that you're passionate about. We're also really passionate about life. You know, like I just said, Tony went from doing something mundane, day-to-day, just doing advertising, to getting a homebrew kit, to doing something he was excited about doing every day. This is a picture from our amphitheater. So he built we'll get into it, but he built a little amphitheater as we were expanding as a brewery, and now we have 12 shows a year there. Free to the public, just come drink beer. All the beer proceeds that we make at the amphitheater show are donated to a local charity. We pick a different charity each week. And again, a good way to party down for a good cause. Talking about the community. So again, this is Tony McGee. This is our founder. This is Ron Lindenbush. He was kind of like employee number 2 at Lagunitas. This is the original truck that Tony used to drive around West Marin and drop off our kegs. He would brew 14 kegs of beer at a time, and he would drive up and down the coast of California, just north of San Francisco. He had about 8 different bars, and he would sell the kegs into these bars, and he would always save 1 or 2 kegs to drop off for a charity event or for a local community event. Basically letting these people turn beer into money for whatever they were passionate about, whatever their cause was. And this is honestly carried on through our 26 years of history. It's just part of Lagunitas DNA, finding a way to kind of give back through beer. In the beginning, we always said we were beer rich and cash poor. And maybe we have a little bit more money now, but we still try to support everything we do through beer and find different ways to kind of fuel the local communities and the communities that we serve beer in. We have much better trucks now, by the way, too. The trucks look a lot better. So, now we'll get into kind of talking about the brewery. This is currently what Petaluma looks like. This is our mothership, as we call it. Again, just north of San Francisco. When we started, we were all in these 2 little buildings. That's all. When we moved to this first facility, we were only in these 2 buildings, and since then we've kind of taken over this whole space over the last 25 years. You saw that picture of the show happening. This area right here is the amphitheater, so that's where we like to host a lot of parties and do a lot of community events. But when we talk about the brewery, again, I think it all kind of starts with this guy right here. This is Tony McGee. This is probably 4 months after he decided that he was going to be a professional brewer. Tony started like most brewers do, home brewing on a kitchen stove. So Tony would got a homebrew kit as a gift from his wife's brother. He started brewing batches of beer at home, and you know, when you're brewing beer, you create a lot of like wort and sugary, syrupy stuff that can boil over and spill into the kitchen. Well, it boiled over and it got stuck in the kitchen area, and his wife went to go cook a holiday dinner and caught the whole kitchen on fire. So Tony got the boot out of the house, no more home brewing at the house, and moved to a little town called Lagunitas, which is where we got our name. It was right down the road from his house, And he started basically after 10 batches of homebrew, he started to be a professional brewer. He was like, I'm in. This is what I want to do. So he started taking out loans and buying old dairy equipment and converting it into brewery equipment. And the early days of Lagunitas, this is the shed, the first brew house. So you just saw the Petaluma brew house, what we look like now. This is where it started. Kind of like the tech companies of Steve Jobs starting in a garage or whatever. He was started in a garage, but just brewing beer. This is the original brew house. It was a 7-barrel system, so about 15 kegs at a time, 14 kegs at a time. He would go out and market the beer and sell the beer. He would deliver the beer. He would keg the beer. It was basically a one-man show for the first 2 years of the brewery. So from 1993 till about 1995, it was a one-man show. He did everything he could to grow the brand in that little area, but eventually he was dumping all the yeast and extra ingredients that he was left over from the brew down the septic system of this little town. And eventually the septic system decided to say, that's too much. Yeast and poop get along really well, if that makes any sense. So the septic system started to talk back. And when the septic system talks, you listen. So in 1995, he moved to Petaluma. 1995 is also a really important year because not only did we move to Petaluma, but it's the year that we first brewed IPA. So everybody has an IPA in front of them right now. Same fucking recipe since 1995, really. There are much bigger, much bolder, much hoppier IPAs nowadays. And that was never the intent of this beer. This beer was always kind of intended to be a balance between the hops and the malt. It wasn't meant to overpower your senses or take over the inside of your mouth. He really focused on the balance between the malt and the hops. And in 1995, nobody was making an IPA. There was no breweries that were focusing on making IPAs. Nowadays, if you're a brewery and you're not making an IPA, it's a miss, It's one of the most popular styles of beer that there are out there. And in a way, I'm not going to say Tony was the first, but in a way, he was the one that made it very popular. He made it trendy. He took a old English style of beer, IPA, and made it a West Coast style. He made it cold. He carbonated it, and he added a lot of classic, old school West Coast brewing hops. So Cascade, Centennial, Chinook, Willamette, Amarillo. These are some of the hops that you'll find in this beer. And everybody told Tony back in 1995 that it was stupid. Nobody was ever going to drink IPA. It was really dumb, and thank goodness he stuck with it and kind of made it who we are. So a little bit more about IPA. ABV, it's over 60% of the business still. So everything we're able to do really kind of stems from IPA. It was our 100th batch of beer. So yeah, cheers to that. It's definitely positioned as our flagship. It's the beer we sell the most of. All the beers that we kind of support IPA in one way or another, but this is our bread and butter. This is definitely the one we're most well known for. So like I said, 1995, he moved from that little brew house to this brew house in Petaluma. That's where we've been ever since. We put our first couple beers in bottles. These are the first 3 beers that Lagunitas ever put into a bottle. Tokoloma Amber, Bugtown Stout, and Dogtown Pale Ale. There's a little bit of history there too. We'll kind of get into it. This is the first bottling machine that Tony ever had. He built it himself out of 2x4s and brewery tubing and filler tubes, and it basically slid up and down, and he could fill 6 bottles of IPA at a time, or whatever we were doing at that time. We still had a lot of community events and a lot of community parties. We'd roll up this door and put a little bar right here and bring a band in and sell $2 beers that we could donate that money back to some charity again. But eventually we got kicked out of this space too for partying a little too hard. And we moved right across the street, which is where we've been ever since, to 1280 North McDowell. When we moved, in typical Lagunitas fashion, we moved by having a party. Best way to kind of connect with people is we think to have a party and drink beer and listen to music. So we hired a bunch of circus clowns and mascots, and basically Tony stood up on a chair at one point during the party and was like, all right, guys, if it's not bolted to the floor, pick it up and carry it across the street. We're moving. Nobody did that. They just grabbed their beers and walked across the street, but he tried. So this is our new house in 1280 North McDowell, right across the street. We have grown and grown and grown over the years. Like I said, we were in one of the buildings and we were in two of the buildings. Now it's a whole campus. This is our newest brewery. This was installed in 2012. It's a 250 or 300 hectoliter system. This is the amphitheater I was talking about. So as we were installing this brew house and building out the building, we started piling up all this dirt, and this is actually Tony on a backhoe moving the dirt to build this amphitheater to throw these parties. And so yeah, this is our home. If you ever come up to Northern California, please come visit us. It's a really awesome place to come drink beer, have a sandwich, talk to your friends. We have live music every day, Wednesday through Sunday. Really cool place to party. I miss it. In 2014, so we were growing like crazy. We were going 30, 40, 50% a year. And we had hit capacity in Petaluma just after 2 years of that new system. So in 2014, we moved to Chicago. We built a second brewery in Chicago. It's a 1,000 square meter building, huge old steel building. We put two 250 barrel systems, so we basically tripled our capacity. This is where the majority of our beer comes from. For international, it's just a lot easier to ship it from Chicago than from Petaluma. All of our beer is cold stored. From the minute it's brewed to the minute it comes over here, it's kept in cold storage. We don't pasteurize our beer. We like to maintain the live, kind of fresh, citrusy, fruity qualities that we're hoping to get out of our beer. It also has a tap room, and we've actually partied a lot in this parking lot. It's where we have the Lagunitas Beer Circus in Chicago. Moving on. So now we can kind of get into some of the storytelling, some of the things that I feel like have made Lagunitas unique. Again, we'll talk about the dog and the splotch, talk about some of the labels that Tony writes himself, and just some of the things that we feel are really important. Has everybody seen this before? You guys seen this? Anybody? Those guys have. This label is, this little dog ends up on all of our labels. It's on basically everything we do. It's on my shirt. So one of the first beers Tony ever bottled was Dogtown Pale Ale. And he had an icon for each one of his beers. Tony liked to speak through imagery and liked to speak through pictures. So Dogtown got this logo, and now, you know, wherever I go all over the world, I feel like people are asking me, Russell, what's the dog? Is that your dog? Is that Tony's dog? Well, Tony wrote a book. It's called So You Want to Start a Brewery. And as Tony was driving across the country, sure, you can bring it up. Tony was driving through New Mexico, and he actually hit a dog in his van while he was driving. And he took the dog and put it in the van and got it to a vet, got the dog fixed, brought it back to the brewery. The dog lived like 15 years, lived a long, long time. And he didn't want to see it go. He didn't want to see the dog fade away, so he started putting it on everything. And the dog just kind of lived as a legend of Lagunitas. He had it stuffed and put it in his office. And, you know, he would go like, it was starting to fall apart. The fur was coming out, and stuff was happening with the taxidermy of the dog. And he was like, he would always ask people, I don't know, what am I supposed to do with the dog? What do I do with it? And they would just kind of look at him like, you sick man, you know, you stuffed your dog that lived for forever. And so he started putting it on all the labels. And the funny thing about that story is none of that's true. It's a total lie. That's not true at all. The dog is just a clip art file, and it's not true. That's just for fun. But Tony always told us to tell our own story about the dog, so we all have our own dog story. That's my dog story. It's just a clip art file. Tony loved the dog. It was on this beer right here that you're getting around right now, this Dogtown Pale Ale. That was the first place the dog ever showed up. But again, it's nice having some imagery that kind of goes along with our beers. This one, has anybody seen this before? Raise your hand if you've seen it. These guys have, again, 3 of them. There's one on my hat. This is a bird shit. This logo comes from bird shit. Bird pooped on Tony's car while he was driving to the brewery one day, took a picture of it, turned it into a piece of artwork. I'm sure you guys have all seen the Nike swoosh, you know? Nike has their swoosh. Tony basically wanted to have a Nike swoosh. He wanted to have his own icon that could represent the brand without needing to say any words. So if you see this logo and you know, you're part of the in crowd, you kind of know, this is our Nike swoosh. So hopefully it does well for us. But we end up putting it on a lot of our swag nowadays. But again, finding ways to tell a story without necessarily even needing words. You know, finding imagery to tell a story. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, these are some of the images that represent Lagunitas, and if you know, you're kind of part of the tribe and you're kind of included in what we're doing. The other thing that's been crucial to Lagunitas' success, I feel like, as a brewery is finding a way to express our personality through our labels. So this is our IPA label, obviously. Tony designed the labels himself. He kind of took the 3 letters and smushed them together a little bit, made it look as old as possible. On all of our labels, beer labels, you can read a little story. This is just one way, again, for consumers who are really interested to get a little bit of Lagunitas personality through our beers. We're hoping to kind of entice you to come and figure out more about what's going on with us. But in a way, Tony made IPA the brand more than Lagunitas. There were years while I was working festivals where it's like, oh, you work for IPA? Oh, you work for IPA? And it's like, yeah, you know, in a way I do. The company I work for is Lagunitas, but in a way IPA pays all my paychecks. So kind of big, bold. He wanted people to be able to see the logo as they were walking up from the parking lot, you know, and kind of spot that Lagunitas handle and just go right for it. It really did kind of cut through a lot of customer confusion. And again, at the time, it was ahead of its time. You know, nobody in 1995 was really making IPA their staple beer style. It definitely was not West Coasticized, whatever. So very lucky, I feel like, to kind of take this logo and cut through any confusion that there may be about the beer. Any questions? Are there any questions? Great. You got a question. Sure, go ahead.
We're talking about the IPA, so as you were talking, that people recognized you as Lagunitas IPA. They don't recognize you as a brewery called Lagunitas.
Correct.
And so I think that you're feeling dependent on the IPA. And what do you think about the future of the Lagunitas and Lagunitas IPA? As you have a flagship, but this flagship may be too much important. If you take Dogfish Head,
sure,
for example, that the owner of Dogfish Head just said that he doesn't want to be dependent on one beer, because if tomorrow people don't want to drink IPAs for no reason or just one specific reason, maybe you will be fucked.
Yeah, we'd be totally fucked. Yeah, if that was. So yeah, we've sat around a table and smoked a joint and talked about this same thing before. As we like to put it, there's the court of public opinion. You know, there is you guys are part of that court of public opinion, and I think as much as we want to hang our hand on our flagship, you know, it's good to build a brand around having a flagship. You know, if that shifts, I think we need to be able to shift with it. You know, internationally we have a core range of really 4 beers that go everywhere. Depending on popularity and people's taste buds, I think we need to be willing to push one style ahead of the other, and if it's not IPA anymore, that's part of being a beautiful brewer, is being able to adapt and be flexible and again, take your passion, something. All of our beers generally start from something that we like. I think you have to be passionate about the things that you're making. So before we really do it for somebody else, we're going to do it for ourselves. And if we make a brilliant beer, we're not going to be scared to try and scale that beer, even if it overtakes IPA. But right now, in terms of what I think we see globally, is there's still a lot of room for IPAs around the rest of the world. It is semi-synonymous with craft beer now in a way, but if the time comes, I think we'll shift.
Are you trying to maybe balance the production with other beers and try to put other beers in front for the customers?
Right. Yeah. Right now, the strategy is we know we can make this consistently. We know we can ship it consistently. So I think right now we're going to hang our hat on IPA until the court of public opinion says otherwise, that it's not going to pass. Then we'll have to shift. In the States, you see a lot of canned beers now. I don't know if cans are becoming more popular over here. We were one of the last big breweries, or whatever you want to say, to put our beer in cans. But again, it's listening to the people who drink our beer and who are a part of our community, and trying to take things that we enjoy and are passionate about and give the people what they want. But no, I think part of being a brewer is being flexible and understanding where you're selling beer, and again, just making beers that you're passionate about. If you do something you love, it's a lot easier to give it to other people, and that's kind of what we're going to stick with. Right now, we're pretty happy, and we are noticing, like France. France is a very mature beer market. The styles vary. So you walk around here and there's 500 different beers, and yeah, it's not all IPAs. There's a lot of other styles going on right there, and so we're never going to be a boring brewery and just make one beer, our thing. I think we'll always try and have a rotation and a seasonal package. And on April 20th, we've got a special beer coming to Paris, the Waldo Special. It's a big hopped up IPA. If you want to know more about it, you can talk to the people in the back of the room. They'll know where those parties are going to be. I think you need to listen to what's going on in people's mouths. Yeah.
Thanks. D'autres questions?
We only got a couple more things to talk about. This is a beer we're pouring at our stand right now. Has anybody seen this one before? No? So there's a funny story behind this beer. 2005, which is like the first time I started hanging out with the Lagunitas boys, we used to have these parties at the brewery. We'd set up we'd get a live band, we'd maybe barbecue some food and hang out. And we were doing really well as a business. As a brewery, we were growing really well. And that caught the attention of our local ABC, Alcoholic Beverage Control System. So unbeknownst to us, we didn't really know, they started sending undercover agents to these parties every week on Thursday and trying to buy drugs, basically, from our employees. They were like, they must be selling drugs. There's no way they can be getting this popular off of just selling beer alone. So they would try and buy drugs from the guys who were bottling the beer or from the guys kegging the beer, and they were always like, no, man, I'm not going to sell you any. We'll go out with you and like smoke a joint or something, but we're not going to sell any weed with you. So they investigated us for 6 weeks, and one day we're having one of these parties, and we're drinking beer and hanging out, and then Ron, employee number 2, whips out a big doobie and goes to smoke it at the brewery, and sirens come out and lights come in, and every cop in Petaluma, every cop in the North Bay seemed like they were there. There must have been 60 police officers there, and they put Ron in handcuffs and they throw him in the back of a car, and they serve Tony McGee a cease and assist to stop production and stop brewing beer, and basically shut us down. They shut down the entire facility. Luckily, we had some pretty good lawyers, and we were able to fight kind of what they were trying to do. And the laws that they were able to pin on us were a 1920s prohibition law that had to do with disorderly house, which basically falls with anything to drug use on site, prostitution. But it was a really old law. We were able to fight it. They were trying to shut us down for 1 year, like the whole year of 2005. Had they done that, I wouldn't be here today. The brewery wouldn't exist anymore. We would have had to close and file for bankruptcy. But after fighting it, we got a 2 weeks suspension, and we got to pick the time frame that we were suspended. So we picked January, and we took that January to actually install a new bottling line and slow down production. And then we brewed a beer, like anything we like to do. Like, we knew we were busted, so we brewed a beer for these ABC agents, basically, and called it Undercover Investigation Shutdown Ale. Again, we told a nice little story. So when we got our license back, the ABC agent walks into Tony's office and he hands him the license. He's like, "Here's your license to brew beer." And Tony, just kind of being Tony, was like, "Is this what you wanted to do? You wanted to shut down businesses? You wanted to make businesses struggle?" And the guy was like, "No, I actually wanted to be an astronaut." And Tony was like, "Well, you missed the mark there. You really missed the mark." Walks out. And so on here on the label, you can see, "We brewed this especially bitter ale in dedication to all the world's would-be astronauts. In rememberation of the 2005 St. Patrick's Day massacre on brewery grounds. We also enjoy a celebration of our 20-day suspension in January. Do the crime, do the time, get the bragging rights." That was kind of Tony's fun little way of jabbing it back at the ABC for shutting us down. And I actually ran into this would-be astronaut 10 years later in 2015 at a conference in Sacramento. And it is now his favorite beer, and he buys 10 cases a year every year, and he gives it to all of his friends. So in a way, you keep your enemies close, and this was kind of one of our ways to do it. I'd recommend you go try it. It's a really big beer, a little bit of sweetness, maybe some barley wine characteristics, and then a little bit of dry hopping. But we're pouring it over at our booth. Any questions about that? Yeah. Got one more beer we're going to try for everybody. This is the Daytime. So we'll get into, this is our brewery in Chicago. It's a 250 barrel system. So big difference from the first brewery to this one, right? Yeah, pretty crazy. This is what 20 years of growth will do for you. They'll allow you to buy better equipment, they'll allow you to source the best ingredients, and they'll allow you to hire better people. A lot of people want to say that being a big brewery is bad, it puts a target on our back for being a big brewery. But I can honestly tell you that our beer is better today than it was 10 years ago. And it is because we're getting better ingredients, we're using better equipment, and we're hiring the best people. That's really how you make better beer and you make consistent beer, is to have those things going on. Yeah, shiny. Ooh, yeah, that's great. So what makes beer really cool? Well, we think it's hops. So the beer you just got, Daytime, is essentially there's not a big grain build. There's just a lot of citrusy, fruity hops. This is a field in Yakima Valley. The thing that I think makes Lagunitas unique in terms of our hops is how we get our hops. In the early 2000s, hops were just treated as a commodity. So they were sold to the highest bidder, basically. It was a buyer-seller market. There was no partnership. There was no relationship. And if you kind of remember saying we genuinely try to connect with everyone we talk with, that includes the people we were buying our ingredients from. So what we did is we found a way to focus on economic stability and fair pricing, basically setting up a guaranteed salary for these farmers. This is totally unique. If you've ever been a farmer, you're dependent on your crops year to year to year. Very rarely are you guaranteed a salary for your crops. So we found a way to set up these partnerships and guarantee them X amount of money no matter what they were able to produce. If they produced more, they got a bonus. If they produced less, they still got that same amount. And what this allowed our hop farmers to do is develop new hops. Daytime has some of these experimental hops in it that essentially Lagunitas is one of the first ones to be able to use because we have these amazing partnerships with our hop farmers. And we didn't keep this exclusive to Lagunitas. We opened up the ability to do this to all brewers in the United States. It wasn't something we were trying to just hoard. We really did want to create a community around the ingredients that were really important to our beer. It's expensive to grow hops. It takes 10 years to develop a new hop. So by flooding and making these partnerships and by flooding them with a little bit of extra resources, they're able to expand their fields, do more experimenting, thus allowing us to get ingredients that are some of the best in the world. And making good beer is all about having good ingredients. Yeah, so a lot of pictures of hops. Some of these farmers even put big signs up that say, "We grow Lagunitas," which is pretty cool. And yeah, so I think one of the things that really makes us unique, and not only did we do it with hops, when we found it working with hops, we decided to also find ways to work with our barley growers. So again, create these sustainable long-term partnerships with our growers. This is our CFO, Leon Sharon. Leon went up there and met a few of the families who grow malt, and they walked through the fields. And malt growers have to decide at one point if they're going to grow barley for brewing or for consumption or for feed. So again, we wanted to set them up with success to grow brewer's barley, to grow the grain that we needed. Question, go ahead. 3 minutes. It's my 3-minute mark. So again, creating genuine connections, finding ways to participate in the communities, not only that we sell beer, but where we get the ingredients for our beer. Super key to Lagunitas. I'm going to take the last 2 minutes and just open it up. What the fuck do you guys want to know? Do you guys want to know anything? Is there any questions out there? How do you say Lagunitas? I say it wrong, apparently. Nope. Yeah, go ahead. That's it. Well, thank you for showing up. It's good to have friends, so we really appreciate you guys coming and drinking beer with us. Come hang out with us at the booth. Yeah, cheers. That's it.
Merci Russel. Vous pouvez retrouver Lagunitas un peu au fond là-bas, il y a le stand où vous retrouverez toutes les bières de Lagunitas et le Waldo's. Donc ne pas oublier que c'est le 20 juin.
C'est le 20 avril. Dans plusieurs établissements, vous avez le Dirty Dick, l'Apéroc, bière culte et la taverne des Corrigans. Voilà, si vous voulez vous rejoindre pour célébrer ça avec nous, c'est avec plaisir.
Donc pour rappel, Waldo's, qui est une spéciale release qui font une fois dans l'année, une bière très alcoolisée mais très houblonnée. Et on a la chance en France depuis un an de participer à cet événement international de la sortie de la Waldo's une fois par an. Voilà. Merci encore. Bon salon. Et on se retrouve à 2h pour la conférence avec Philippe Wouters.